Most social platforms want your data. ValuesCo wants your impact. Today on Token for Your Thoughts, we're joined by Andrew Berkowitz. Andrew is building a gamified platform that turns values into action, backed by creators, nonprofits, and mission-led brands. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Lindsay.
Really looking forward to our conversation today. We have a lot of interesting things to cover about ValuesCo. First up, though, it would be great to hear about your journey prior to starting ValuesCo. Were there any interesting twists and turns from other career paths that brought you here, or have you always been somewhat involved in mission-driven work and community building?
Well, the answer to both of those is yes.
Okay.
I've been an entrepreneur since I graduated from university, and the inherent nature of that journey is twists and turns. Even though looking backwards, it might, make sense and the dots might connect, as Steve Jobs says. But my journey actually started in podcasting. I didn't tell you this before we started recording, but I basically out of school built a podcast company. We had a portfolio of our own original shows, and we had a client service model really focused on servicing the think tanks in DC, producing their shows for them, kind of running this digital strategy for them. And, that journey was, first off, very difficult to turn a somewhat tractioned podcast into a commercially viable business back in 2016. Which I'm sure is something top of mind for you as well. It's not very easy to do, and so that journey was about a 5-year experience that was really in this new era of how the next generation of consumers was engaging with media in a very different way, in a way that was completely subverting the traditional advertising funnel. Consumers were starting to curate their own feeds. I think we had really gotten to this point in social media where the novelty and the effectiveness of social media ads was starting to wear off. And, so really my thinking around that time was like, what does a world post-interruption advertising look like? And I eventually went over to the Milken Institute, became a media fellow at Milken back in 2020, and kind of really used that platform to pursue that thought of like what's coming next. Like this whole publisher world is really breaking down. We had 2.5 million syndication with our shows.
Wow.
But when you actually go into the data, like that's what I was receiving in terms of like the reporting back from my syndication partners and from my publisher partners. But when I would go back into the underlying data of the downloads and the listens, it would be like 30 downloads through those channels.
Oh, wow.
And so I started to get really confused. There was just a massive disconnect in what was happening. And so summer 2020, social tokens and NFTs really started to take shape as a narrative. And that was the light bulb moment for me to really see like, okay, like Web3, blockchain, wherever this stuff goes from a consumer lens, like this is where the future of advertising and engagement is going to be. So that was the original impetus for starting ValuesCo. How can we were called Social Stack back in the day. We were an early social token platform. And the idea was, how can we build infrastructure to turn the brand to consumer connection into a more co-creative experience, as opposed to an interruption advertising landscape, which has existed, I guess, before, the internet, right? And so that was my journey.
How did you get?
My experience in school was just like a constant frustration in kind of like being inside the box and never really feeling like it was realistic or practical for me to step out of that structure. And so my, I guess, determination to go right into entrepreneurship head on after school was just kind of a buildup of my entire, primary school and university experience of this frustration of the structures and the systems that I felt trapped in. And so as soon as I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2015, it felt like freedom. It felt like, okay, like I'm out and I'm gonna chart my own course, and I don't even know what that means yet. And that's why I started a podcast, actually, because I had no money, I had no network, I had no foundation to build on. And so the podcast was, I guess, an idea to build my network, give myself a platform, and kind of build myself up into someone that could actually hold a successful business.
Okay. Yeah. And what was that first experience like? You said you did it for 5 years.
Oh, I mean, it was incredibly grueling because, again, like even though like we basically had a portfolio of shows that covered emerging market tech and innovation, and we're kind of the leaders in our niche, had maybe 10 to 15,000 like really active listeners per show,
Yeah.
and it was extremely difficult to, again, turn that into a commercially viable thing.
Okay.
Our audiences were like world bankers and emerging market tech investors and think tank people. It's very unique to kind of DC audience. But it's just incredibly difficult to, monetize. And I guess where I maybe like could have used some, if I had to go back and choose a different path, like it would have been an easier journey if I spent a year in corporate and built out some savings before I went all in on entrepreneurship. But it built me up and taught me to kind of be resilient and trust the higher source of a higher power. And I wouldn't change anything about the journey. Wouldn't change anything about it.
Yeah. It's all kind of learnings along the way. It kind of shapes who you are. It gives you that unique perspective. So I think that makes sense. And so what did the transition from podcasting to starting Social Stack as it was then, what did that look like?
I mean, it was a pretty natural transition, honestly, because like hosting this show on emerging market startup ecosystems, I was every week interviewing, some of the top founders all over the world, and was really able to kind of pick their brains and really understand what it takes to raise capital from VCs, what it takes to build a high growth tech business. And so I had spent 5 years kind of like, I guess, in my own created university, I guess, around this stuff. And so I think it was a pretty natural, like I was totally ready to do it. And I think that, like it's, building a tech enabled company, in my experience is way easier than building a media company. It's just, I don't think I would ever do it again, honestly. It's just too hard. And if I ever started a podcast again, I would start a podcast, kind of like as a content strategy for a business, but the podcast itself isn't the core kind of business. That's just that my experience, and maybe I was just a little bit too early in doing podcasting, and so yeah, I mean, yeah, it was natural transition, really.
Okay. And when you started Social Stack, did you have the vision of what the company was going to be? Did it align with what you're heading towards now, or did it start out as something different?
I mean, what's funny is it almost exactly aligns to where we're heading to now. The original vision, there's the kind of like higher vision of what we're doing, and then there's the more practical kind of like, total addressable market, like pitch deck, like all these things. And the kind of higher ideal that we're holding is being a launch pad for impact-driven currencies that are able to kind of develop into their own purpose-driven social economy that is incentivizing positive behavior and rewarding people for doing good in the world and kind of uniting people around meaningful missions. So that was the original impetus of starting the company. The actual kind of practical go-to-market back in those days was social tokens. But social tokens never really garnered enough liquidity to kind of like become anything. And then FTX happened Web3 became a deal killer for anyone that was doing anything B2B2C. And so we had to kind of remove that from the pitch and find some unique value propositions independent of Web3.
Yeah.
And so now in this, kind of, I guess, next era of the company and Web3, meme coins are kind of the, I guess, fulfilled promise of what social tokens were supposed to be.
Right.
And there are many things wrong with how meme coins have gone over the past year and a half. But there's also many things that can go right if we intentionally decide that that's the direction that we're going to go as an industry. And so that original vision of being a kind of purpose-driven currency launchpad is now back. And it's just taken the shape of meme coins in this current era.
So as you said, you started as Social Stack in 2021, rebranded to ValuesCo in 2023, and then there's this evolution from social tokens to meme coins. And how was that transition, pivoting, reacting to what was happening after FTX? Was it like did you have like a moment of panic, or was it difficult, or was it just, okay, we're going to shift with the market and kind of meet what people are looking for, like after this change?
Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned as an entrepreneur is that it's never okay to panic. Like literally, no matter what is happening, you have to stay calm and kind of keep a positive mental attitude frame for your team and for everybody else. So FTX happened. I don't know. I just kind of laughed because it's crypto. That it's kind of expected.
Right.
So as soon as it happened, the next day I knew we had to fully take Web3 out of the pitch because I knew brands were not going to want to touch it. And so that's what we did, and really honed in on a core value proposition of, the whole premise of the company has been, again, like ushering in what comes next after interrupted advertising.
Yeah.
And that transition is actually a transition that has played out, honestly, mostly in the creator space, where we've gone from, kind of TV celebrities to internet creators. And in my opinion, where we go from there is peer-to-peer micro-influencers. And so everybody's a micro-influencer. If you have 1,000 followers and you post something about a brand and you get 5 of your friends to buy, that's a way better conversion than anything that's happening in the influencer space. So that was, really where we decided to kind of like focus the messaging around incentivized UGC and working with micro-influencers to create these kind of viral moments and leverage gamification and the blockchain to do that. So that was where we took the company right after FTX and ended up being a fairly successful kind of rebrand, reframe pivot. We closed deals with Time Magazine and Lyft and Snoop Dogg and Mark Ruffalo and Allbirds and Olipop, and really started to find our footing in 2023 heading into 2024. And so it was a very successful pivot in terms of what needed to happen for the company. And now that Web3, it's funny because Web3 is back, but it's definitely not back from a B2B perspective. Like brands are not touching meme coins at all, or they haven't. I think that's going to change, but so far they haven't.
Right. Yeah, you've had some great partnerships, like you said, Time, Lyft, Mark Ruffalo, Allbirds. One of your earlier campaigns was Gen Zero, a climate action campaign where you partnered with Time. And in the 3 weeks that it ran, 24,000 climate actions were taken by participants. Can you tell us a bit more about how you set this up and how you were able to achieve such great results?
Yeah. So the product that we built is this kind of gamified consumer-facing app where top of funnel are creators and publishers that
Mm-hmm.
are basically promoting the experience, driving user traffic into the experience. And then the experience itself is really built around incentivized UGC prompts. So you're prompting users to take actions and create content of themselves taking the actions. And
Okay.
so some of the actions of that campaign were like, showing off or starting your compost at home, trying a vegan meal, signing different climate petitions, doing a clothing swap with your friends, doing a plastic-free challenge for the day, all sorts of stuff like that. That's, kind of micro actions towards a better world that collectively can have a big impact if the thing scales. And that's always
Mm-hmm.
kind of been, again, the vision here of like launching these purpose-driven social economies on chain that have these kind of micro actions and incentives baked in, where if everyone's doing
Mm-hmm.
it, it's making the world a better place. And so that was a really interesting learning experience for us. The main thing we realized is like you can't give users like 20 actions that they can take. You have to
Right.
give them one action that they can take, give them a reward for taking that action, and then you
Mm-hmm.
could drop them into a more fuller, richer experience from there. But if you're just dropping them into an experience that has a bunch of actions and a bunch of prizes, it's not going to work because users like it's too complicated. You need one thing to do and one thing to, the first dopamine hit before you drop them into anything else.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And is that was going to be one of my questions is how are you tracking all of these things? If someone like plants a tree or eats a vegan meal, how do you know they're doing it? But so the idea is they create content showing that they're doing it, and then that's the proof, and then they can get a reward.
That's right. And there's different ways to verify from there. We're at a point now where Vision AI is really good and
Mm-hmm.
it's good enough to be able to kind of feed it images and video or images and videos and have the AI do the check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because that was going to be my next question is who's going around checking for the videos, logging them, because when you've got 24,000 actions happening, that sounds like a lot of work. So you're actually
Back in
using
20,
AI
yeah.
to do that?
So yes, back in 2022, actually, our first answer to that problem was to work with an outsourcing firm in the Philippines and just have kind of really like the lowest cost labor we can find
Yeah.
to just like approve or deny images and photos. So that's actually the first system that we were building out. And then
Okay.
something called ChatGPT was released. And
Yes.
I was like, oh, okay, here we go. AI is here.
Nice. Yeah. Wow. So you were doing it all manually first,
Yeah,
and then it's now replaced by AI.
exactly.
Nice. Yeah, because I bet that can really help when you're thinking about scaling and really increasing these numbers.
It's the only way.
Yeah,
Can't it can't. Yeah, we've tried. Yeah, we've tried it, and yeah, there's no way to scale it without AI.
yeah. Um, okay, and Time to Vote was another campaign. The goal was to get 50,000 young voters to check their voter registration status and engage in the 2024 election. What was your approach to reaching that audience in a way that actually motivated action? Was it similar to the Gen Zero strategy and campaign?
Yeah, I mean there's two real ways to incentivize action from people. One is the actual rewards.
Hmm.
So it's every campaign we do has at least one sweepstake prize, um, and then we have all sorts of different product rewards and coupon codes, and are really kind of building out a reward network. Uh,
Hmm.
and so that's one way to do it, rewards. Um, the other way to do it is basically, and this is actually, it's interesting because like the survey data that we have from all the Gen Z users is this second way is actually more compelling for them than the rewards, which is basically social acknowledgement,
Oh, wow.
being
Okay.
being seen or recognized
Hmm.
for what you're contributing to the cause. or to
Right.
something that you care about. And so that's where we've actually started to focus our reward mechanism on. And it's like, a Gen Z would rather get a 5-second video of gratitude from Mark Ruffalo thanking them for participating than, I don't know, a pair of Allbirds shoes. At least that's what the survey data says. The
Interesting.
other thing the survey data says is Gen Z's words don't align with their actions.
Okay. Great.
Who do you think the biggest buyer of Shein is in fast fashion? It's Gen Z. But then who's the most vocal about climate and sustainability? It's Gen Z. And so
Yeah.
it's,
Okay.
it's I guess human nature. But so yeah, for the Get Out the Vote campaign, we ended up having about 40,000 actions taken. We
Amazing.
worked with Snoop Dogg's ice cream company. We worked with Lyft, who provided us a bunch of $10 gift card coupons for people taking action. And so that was our first kind of real at scale civic engagement campaign that really went really well.
Nice. Amazing. And so, how has that evolved into what you're doing now? You're building Values Network, a new social media platform. Can you tell us a bit about that and how meme coins are involved and how, yeah, blockchain in general is involved?
Yeah. So the vision has always been to build a decentralized social network that is kind of bringing all these stakeholders together, brands, nonprofits, publishers, users, creators, to co-create meaningful things in the world. And so the evolution of the product to Values Network is the kind of culmination of all these different things and taking all the learnings that we've kind of built as a company over the past few years and launching our own decentralized social networking protocol with that. And
Nice.
so there's two ways to go to market in crypto. There's going to market with a product for crypto natives, and then there's going to market with a product that's for mainstream consumers with blockchain underneath the hood. And those are two
Yeah.
very different companies, two very different go-to-markets and messaging. And so basically, we've realized that we need to have two different products, and each of those products need to cater to each of those types of consumers. Because you really can't, you can't go to market you can't really go to market with one product for both.
Right.
NBA Top Shot is the one anomaly, but it was a flash in the pan and it's dead now. No one's doing anything there. And so the next evolution of the company is really fulfilling on the original promise of purpose-driven social economies. And purpose-driven social economies need a couple things to make them work. One is they need a currency that is just the kind of core liquid reward mechanism in the economy. And then you need to have a kind of structure where all the different stakeholders in society can interface in the economy and get value out of it. And so what that means for us is basically leveraging this gamified campaign product and then adding on a meme coin currency to bring it all together. And so brands input rewards into the economy and they get out first party data and marketing. Nonprofits input actions into the economy so that you have expert and science-based actions for people to take towards that microeconomy's mission. You have creators and publishers, which basically serve as the distribution for these economies. And then you have users that take the action, get rewards from the brands, advance the nonprofits' engagements and social reach goals, and that all comes together into this gamified experience where everyone's benefiting and the economy is starting to get traction. And so that's really the next evolution of the company. And we're very excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what will that look like? So, will it be an app that people will go on? Is it going to look and feel like other social platforms where you can post, add content, and also, do these actions? And the meme coin, is it going to be your own meme coin, or are you going to bring other meme coins in?
Yeah. So there's going to be two core products. And those two core products are going to sit on top of our decentralized social networking protocol. And so the social media, so we are building out a social media app that's going to be focused on mainstream consumers.
Yeah.
And is really going to be can think about it as like an Instagram Reels or TikTok style vertical video feed.
Yeah.
That is going to serve as like the central hub of all the action that's being taken. And so that video feed is going to sit next to the action and reward marketplace. And so in that consumer app, blockchain will be underneath the hood. You'll be able to take different actions by submitting content of you doing the action, which populates the vertical video feed. And then the attached reward marketplace is the core way for brands to kind of interface with the product, reward customers, and meet their marketing goals. So that all comes together in kind of gamified social media app. And that we're also going to be putting out our own vertical specific token launchpad, which will communicate more about as we get closer to launch, but the intention is purpose-driven meme coins. And so meme coins that are launched around cause-related cultural moments. And so that launchpad is basically going to serve as the impact-driven currency launchpad to kind of seed the microeconomies that are forming on the social media app.
Okay, nice. And so when reading about the network, the goals that you say that you're trying to achieve are to help people connect with nature, with each other, in person, and then also, with themselves, as opposed to other apps that with the algorithms are just trying to, keep you on the app, keep you scrolling. So how are you going to go about achieving those things? Because they seem to be, sort of the opposite of most social media apps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, there are ways to wield this stuff for good, and there's ways to wield it for not good. And the dopamine hit that you get from the social media apps are incentivizing behaviors that are just feeding bottom lines and are feeding the advertisers and what they want. And so the promise of Web3 is that we can build things that have different incentivization structures. And so as a social media app, you still have to compete within the constraints and the realities of how the market works.
Yeah.
And so you still have to tap into some of these kind of core dopamine, activation points, I guess you would call it. And if you're able to do that while incentivizing positive behavior that is actually serving the user, that's where we need to go as a society. And that's the intention of what we're building here. And so it all comes down to intention, right?
Yeah.
And the intention of Web 2.0 Silicon Valley social media, it's not good. It's all profit extraction. And so if you're able to launch more decentralized social media where the ownership structure is different, the incentives for action are different, then you could start to create better systems. And that's what we hope to do.
I love it. Yeah, so completely flipping the model on its head. Because I agree. I have mixed feelings about social media. I think there are good elements in it. The fact that you can connect with people who might not live near you, who you otherwise wouldn't keep in touch with, and things like that, and share interests with other people, build communities, but there is a lot of problems with it. You know, like you said, the algorithm, it's meant to keep you on there, to draw you back in, and the incentives are, you know, you're the product. You know, they want your time, they want your data. So I really love this idea of flipping that and harnessing it for the good that it has potential to achieve. So do you see this being a place where people will come on and they'll share things about their everyday life or their thoughts, you know, like they do with other platforms? Or is it really just going to be them sharing the actions that they're taking in order to sort of keep the space in that positive, you know, more of a like curated, positive, you know, community? How's that going to work?
Yeah, I think that it's important to leave open some surface area to the early users to decide what direction the platform goes in.
Uh-huh.
And it's important that we are kind of setting the standard and setting the foundational culture of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that we're not like saying this is where we are taking the platform, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is yes. The hope is that this like evolves and thrives, and I think that, you know, like for example, BuzzFeed, they actually recently announced their own kind of positive spin on social media, and so I actually think
Mm-hmm.
that we're moving into a market where there's going to be numerous vertical specific social media platforms that emerge and are launched
Interesting.
and get traction, and you don't need, you know, the entire world's population on your platform for it to be successful. You might only need 1 million users to have a successful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's partly what I think is going to happen here, where we're kind of creating this variation on social media that's a more positive spin and is rewarding users in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can be a multi-billion-dollar company by focusing on this vertical specific opportunity of purpose-driven social.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, where does it go? I think that's going to be a co-creative experience with our early users.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, thinking about the social media landscape as almost becoming a bit more fragmented into platforms that focus on a specific niche. So, who do you see your users being then? Are they, you know, Gen Zs who are very impact driven? Do you have a specific kind of persona in mind of who you see the early adopters and users being?
I do. I believe that we are entering this interesting split in human society at the moment. And I think that there are people that have a positive view for where the world is going and are taking action towards intentionally creating that future that they want to live in. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have people that are in a state of negativity and fear, and that's the reality that they're creating for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have hope and intention that this platform that we're building will be a North Star for people that are positively polarized to um, connect and create. And so I'll keep it a little bit more woo woo with my answer there.
No, I absolutely love it. I think it's really fantastic because, like you said, yeah, we're in this interesting time where there can be a lot of fear if you sit and you dwell on, you know, things happening to the planet and with society, with this, you know, this extreme polarization. You know, there's a lot that you can be stressed and fearful and a little bit doom and gloom about. But I love that there, you know, because and sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming, like, oh, what can I really do to make a change, or, you know, are things going to turn around? But I love the idea of there being this online community that does have this focus on being purpose driven and making that part of your your daily life, because social media, it is, people log in every day, every hour probably. So just using it as an opportunity to connect with other people who are passionate about this and want to make a difference, want to make an impact, and could do maybe a little bit each day in different areas, and be recognized or get a bit of a reward. But no, I think it's brilliant, and have a bit more recognizing, that there is this want for a more positive space online with social media, because that's another thing. Unfortunately, it is such a place where it can be very conflict driven, and I don't know, it can bring out the worst in people sometimes, with keyboard warriors, as they're called. Do you have any specific causes that are near and dear to your heart that you particularly want to pursue or see as campaigns on the platform, or any particular companies or celebrities that you'd like to work with for future campaigns?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to go two different directions with that. The first is, we thought a lot about the different kind of impact verticals that we focus on, and really felt that it was important to be intentional about language. Because when I say climate change, that's a very triggering word for people for two very different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we are striving for is a new vocabulary that is focused on, like we say, like you alluded to earlier, three different pillars: connection to yourself, which is your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health; connection to others, which is community, and how you're connecting with just other humans in general; and then there's connection to nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important one that, in my opinion, encompasses the climate change narrative, because it comes down to a disconnect with nature and biomimicry and the natural order of how things used to work,
Mm-hmm.
that we've seemingly forgotten. And so those are really the focus areas that, in my opinion, encompasses all the traditional kind of impact stuff. When I say impact, people's mind goes to climate, it goes to sustainability, it goes to mental health, it goes to civic
Mm-hmm.
engagement. But that's all old world language.
Yeah.
And we're trying to reinvent that. So that's the first thing I'll say in terms of what I want to see.
Yeah.
What's interesting in terms of you mentioned what celebrities do I want to work with. I actually think that celebrities are dead. The idea of celebrity is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it died when I don't know if you remember when COVID hit and all the celebrities created the saying "Imagine,"
Oh, yes.
you know,
Yes, I remember.
and I think that was an interesting moment, because I think that might be the official marker of when the celebrity died, and
Oh,
when we
interesting.
collectively realize that nobody cares what they have to say, they don't know anything.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I would much rather build a platform where brands are paying 5,000 people with 100 followers
Mm-hmm.
to put something out versus paying, one quote unquote celebrity to
Yeah.
say something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I think we need to go as a society, of kind
Mm-hmm.
of decentralizing and empowering the grassroots and moving away from the idea of a celebrity and moving towards the idea of subject matter experts. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the big problems we have as a society is we give validation and thought leadership, like an energy and an aura of thought leadership, towards celebrities just because they're a celebrity.
Yeah.
But most celebrities are morons. They're very stupid, actually. I'm here in LA. I'm in Hollywood. I know. They have managers. They parrot the lines that they're given, And so we need to move away from that as a thought leadership model, and we need to move towards a better focus on identifying real subject matter experts
Yeah.
and listening to what they say.
Totally. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it has been this really fascinating shift that's happened, in the last few years or so, especially looking back to 90s, 2000s, just how where the power of celebrity was, was very strong, and to now where with the onset of social media, and I guess everything being so transparent and peeling the curtain back and getting, a peek into who these people really are. And it's not, this sort of idealized version that we think it is. And then shifting to more of the influencers and micro influencers, like you said. So yeah, I think that will be really interesting to see how that plays out. And then also shifting the focus. So talking about peeling back the curtain, some say that building in this space can be a little bit like flying a plane while you build it. What's something that you've had to figure out in real time, or something you wish you'd known sooner about building in Web3?
It's funny, like a lot of what you were saying around social media, just like the negative stuff around social media. That is also equally present in Web3. And so, look, Web3 and crypto, at least the way it has gone, has been one giant slow motion rug pull. The entire thing, all of it. And so you had ICOs. You had then this era of DeFi that was actually had a ton of substance. But the problem was the incentive models were completely off, where you had these VCs that invested in these protocols and then just dumped all their tokens onto retail. And that game kind of got tired or played out. Maybe in 2020, yeah, maybe FTX was the final, okay, this era is over. And so meme coins kind of sprung back up and was hey, we don't need VCs. But the problem was it was the same exact dynamics, but now it was just individuals dumping instead of the VCs getting to dump.
Right.
And so I think it wasn't really a better version that it story told that it was. And so for me as a founder in this space, to date, we've raised about 3.5 million since we started in spring 2021. And I have been very intentional about curating the cap table and ensuring that we don't have too much crypto VC on the cap table, and really focusing a lot of our raise on more venture philanthropists and impact investors and kind of high net worth individuals that were spiritually aware enough to understand what we're doing and to believe long term in what we're doing. And so that is what I would say is really important for any founder in the crypto space who is raising. Whenever you raise from a crypto VC, it's almost a guarantee that they're going to dump as much of your token as they possibly can. And they don't care about you. They don't care about your project. They don't care about your mission. And if they tell you otherwise, they're liars. So you got to try to find either high net worth individuals that you have a lot of conviction that believe in your product and what you're doing. Or you need to find crypto funds where the GPs or the operators of the fund have invested mostly their own capital into that fund. Because if you can find those people, those are independently wealthy people that can actually take a 10-year bet on something and kind of be there in the trenches with the founder. Because the normal crypto VC they have limited partners in the fund where their sole thought and requirement is to return the capital.
Right.
And so their job is to dump your token as much as they can and then dump more. And that's what they're doing 100% of the time.
Okay.
99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's always anomalies. So that is my realistic, breakdown of crypto.
All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm sure that's really great insight for other founders in the space to keep in mind when raising money. So I guess just to wrap things up, you mentioned about the VCs, dumping their coins, and then the meme coin was sort of that version 2.0. You're harnessing, meme coins for good. So where do you see the meme coin market going looking ahead?
So in my opinion, meme coins are tokenized IP. That's where it's going. That's what it always, like, imagine Nintendo launching Pikachu coin.
Right. Yeah.
That would be a $15 billion asset. And, they're probably going to have 85% of it on their books. And so
Wow. Yeah.
that's where I feel all of this meme coin stuff is going. It's going to be basically tokenizing IP and enabling all the brands and owners of the IP to basically unlock the value of it on chain in a fully liquid format. And that's where I think this stuff goes. Now that the SEC has kind of cleared meme coins as collectibles,
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's just a matter of time until the first real big IP meme coin breaks out, and then everyone realizes, okay, we need to do this. We need to do this early, and we need to launch our IP as a meme coin.
That makes a lot of sense because one of the great things about meme coins is the emphasis more like on culture. It's something that people connect with or they find fun, whether it's in association with a brand or with a cute dog. So, right. and that's powerful because, while there are all these really important infrastructure, projects doing great things in the space, like the average person on the street just doesn't understand that or, can relate to it. So I think they are a great way to foster adoption and build the space. So yeah, that's a really interesting take. All right, Andrew, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you again for joining us and sharing everything you're doing with ValuesCo. It sounds absolutely fantastic. A great way to get people behind causes and, taking action for good. Is the launch for Values Network still timed for the summer? When can we expect to hear about the launch and get signed up?
Yeah, so you can sign up now at values.network
Okay.
and be one of the first to kind of garner some insights into any potential airdrop or reward for being early. I'll just say that.
Nice.
We are planning to launch this end of summer, which will kind of bleed over into September. And so that's when everyone should be on the lookout for this platform to go live.
All right, nice. Well, that's super exciting. So, and yeah, we will leave the links to everything in the show notes as well as social handles. So everyone can go and find out more, get signed up and follow you guys on social. So that's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned for more interviews with the people building Web3. Thanks again, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay.
All right, we'll see you on the next episode.